Well, good evening and welcome to the Coffee House on the Hill. We're happy to be here. We're happy all you folks are here tonight. If you happen to be listening into the archived recording of this around the world at some point, well, welcome. We're glad you're here. And so the last time we gathered, we talked about this fellow up here, Fiddle and John Carson. And we did a kind of an hour-long tribute to him. He was the first person that made a commercial country music record, or what would later become country music. They didn't exactly call it that then. So, just a little bit of a quick background. Thomas Edison invents the phonograph in the late 1800s. He pretty much intended it to be used for like recording speeches and things of that nature. He didn't really have the idea of music. There was a fellow by the name of Eldred Johnson that worked for the Victor Company. He invented a spring governor mechanism in 1901 that kind of revolutionized the phonograph, made it much more useful and so forth. And they came up with the idea of recording music, so people would have more reasons to go out and buy more phonographs. So they started recording popular music of the time, like the John Philip Sousa's marching band and Enrico Caruso, the famous tenor, things of that nature. So this went along that way through the early 1900s, up until 1920. And there was a fellow, if we could prompt to the next image here, a fellow by the name of Ralph Peer, who was a record producer, worked for the OK Record Company, which was the General Phonograph Company at the time, and he had discovered that there was a market for blues music. And so he started going to southern cities and finding people to record blues music. The people at his company developed equipment. The original equipment was fairly cumbersome, and they had, it was in a set studio, and all these companies were from the north, somewhere New York City or Chicago or whatnot. So they developed this machinery to take to remote locations, and most of it was in the South. That's where this music was. So they were in Atlanta, 1923, and the story varies a little, but there was kind of a lag in activity one day, and the local fellow that was kind of a scout, more or less, for their company, said, well, I know this old fiddler, he's really popular around here, let's record him. So they got Fiddle and John rounded up, they made 2 records, and initially the record people didn't like him very well. They were a little crude, I guess, to their ear or whatnot, but to their surprise, they sold like crazy. So this started a whole, quest to go out and find more of this. And it didn't take long for the other companies to get involved, and there were several. We have, there's the Victor label that I mentioned there. There was Jeanette Records. That was one of the few that wasn't in a big urban city. It was in northern Indiana. There's another famous Nipper the Terrier that was listening to the sound of his master's voice. And there was Vocalion, and there's the aforementioned OK label, and Columbia was another major player. So all of these people started to get on the bandwagon with this whole music situation. And one of the early bands that they recorded was a fellow by the name of Al Hopkins. He was actually from North Carolina, but the band formed around the Galix, Virginia area. And when they made their records, Mr. Peer asked them, well, what do you call your band? And he said, call us whatever you want, we're just a bunch of hillbillies. Well, the name stuck, and that's what the early country music was known as, hillbilly music. And that term was a little bit, questionable even at that time. Some people took it as an affront and considered it fighting words, and other people kind of wore it like a badge of honor. So the music that they were recording was very old. The oldest part of it came from the British Isles with the first settlers that came over. old fiddle tunes and ballads and airs and things of that nature. There was minstrel tunes that were added to it along the way through the 19th century. So by the 20th century, you had this, this old-time music that was shared in communities. It was played for dances and for entertainments, and it was passed along from one generation to the next. And the 1920s was an era of growth in the country, and there was, the automobile age was coming on, technology was coming in, jazz music was the big craze, and there was a lot of people that kind of had a feeling that, the old-time ways were kind of slipping away from them. So in a way, these people were actually kind of like folk revivalists even at that time. They were trying to record this old familiar tunes, that was home and hearth and all that type of stuff. And so that's kind of how this whole thing got going. So I'll try to start off with a little fiddle tune here that it's just an old tune that was just an old traditional tune, but Al Hopkins and his Hillbilly band did record this at one time, and it's called Cluck, Old Hand. It goes something like this. Market for it, and it was selling really well. So there was a fella, a little bit of a, there's some technicalities. There was actually a country record made a little bit before Fiddle and John by Eck Robertson, who was a Texas fiddler, and he recorded Sally Gooden, and I forget what the other tune was, but they were just instrumentals, so there was no vocal to it. So that's the Fiddle and John thing, was the first country music record with a vocal. But so you also had a fellow by the name of Henry Witter from Virginia who had recorded for the OK Company a few months before Fiddle and John did, and they just kind of shelved his stuff. They didn't use it. Well, after Fiddle and John's record took off, they went and dug Witter's stuff back out and said, well, here we go, we have this, so let's issue it. They put it out on the market, and it started to sell. So one of the first big things that happened, the Victor Company had none of this, and they wanted in on it as well. So they had this fellow by the name of Vernon Dalhart, and he, if any of you remember Kenny Rogers from back in the 70s, was his big era. He was originally from Texas, and he started in pop music, and then switched over to country. Well, that's not the first time that happened, because Vernon Dalhart was from Texas, and he was a trained vocalist. He sang operas and all kinds of popular music of that sort, and he happened to be working for the Victor Company at the time. So they said, the idea of doing a cover song happened very early, because they said, here, sing this, and they handed him the song that Witter had recorded, which was the record, The Old 97. And it told the story of a famous train wreck that happened down in Virginia, and that, as it turns out, was the first million-selling country music record. And I'll do that one for you right here. Well, they handed him his orders in Monroe, Virginia. Said, Steve, you're way behind time. This ain't 38, this is old 97. Put her in the Spencer on time. He turned around and said to his black greasy farming, shovel on a little more coal. And when we cross that white oak mountain, you'll get to watch old 97 let her roll. Let her roll now. Well, it's a mighty rough road from Lynchburg to Danville with a line on a 3-mile grade. It was on that grade that he lost his air brake. You can see what a jump he made. He was going down the grade, making 90 miles an hour when his whistle broke into a scream. He was found in the wreck with his hand on the throttle, scalded to death by the steam. Never speak harsh words to your true love and husband. He might leave you and never return. Thank you, thank you. So I hope this is, going to be a little bit of fun, a little entertaining as we go along here. Let's see. We didn't get a picture of Mr. Dalhart. Let's see what he looked like. Dapper, fine-looking fellow there. I'm probably right in the line of sight, ain't I? Yes, indeed. So that was Mr. Vernon Dalhart, and there was a little bit of dispute amongst, who had the first million-selling record. But from what I've been able to dig up, this guy pretty much holds the claim. So our next bunch here, let's see who we got. There's a bunch from Georgia. And these guys made a big impression. It was Gideon Tanner, Gid Tanner, and the Skillet Lickers. There was a famous string band from Georgia. So you had Gid over here on the left, and Clayton McMitchin was playing the second fiddle, and Fate Norris was the banjo player, and Riley Puckett down here was the guitar player. And he was a blind guitarist, very accomplished for not only for his time, but pretty much any time. He was a very accomplished guitarist. Gid and him actually started out making their first records as a duet in 1924, and then eventually they formed this band. And they played, unfortunately, I really don't have a Skillet Licker tune that I can show you, but they played a very powerful and kind of quick, fast. It had a lot of power to it. It was just. It really moved along. It was kind of, like dance music, but it was, I think it was almost, they sped it up and put a lot of energy in it for the entertainment value. So they recorded for Columbia, so they were a big name. And, all right, let's check out the next one. Here's another fellow that was a pioneer. And his name was Ernest Stoneman, and he was well known as Pop Stoneman. And he eventually had 23 children, although not all of them lived to adulthood. But actually a modern reference, or relatively modern, if you remember little Ronnie Stoneman that used to play the banjo on Hee Haw. That was actually his youngest daughter. And there were several other, they had a whole Stoneman family band at one time. It was some really incredible musicians. They kind of made a comeback like in the 50s and 60s and played the folk music revival and that type of thing. and Pop was still around. He was an old man by that time. But he was one of the pioneers and recorded very early on, starting in 1924. Like I said, the year after Fiddle and John hit, all these other companies are starting to climb on and discover this. And most of these people, are not very well known nowadays. There's a few of them. Pop Stoneman is actually in the Country Music Hall of Fame, which is very rare for people from this pioneer era. Most of them are just lost to time. Most of the Georgia musicians, as a matter of fact, Fiddle and John and Gid Tanner, they're just not recognized like they should be. But Pop Stoneman recorded actually for several different companies. He recorded for Jeanette Records and I believe Ocalion. And so I'll do you a little song here that he recorded, and try one on the auto harp here if this behaves himself. One thing I always kind of liked about old time and the bluegrass music that kind of came out of or spun out of old time music is that the gospel music was always right side by side with the secular music. It was a part of it, and it was very close. You were always very close to it. And this is a little kind of a gospel type of tune that Pop Stoneman recorded. I'll try to do it for you. We are going down the valley one by one, with our faces toward the setting of the sun. Down the valley where the mournful cypress grows, where the tree of death in silence onward flows. We are going down the valley, going down the valley, going toward the setting of the sun. We are going down the valley, going down the valley, going down the valley one by one. We are going down the valley one by one, when our labors of this weary world are done, where the cares of earth forever past, we shall stand upon the river's brink at last. We are going down the valley, going down the valley, going toward the setting of the sun. We are going down the valley, going down the valley, going down the valley one by one. We are going down the valley one by one. Human comrade, you were there, well, I have none. But a tender hand shall guide us lest we fall. Christ is going down the valley with us all. We are going down the valley, going down the valley, going toward the setting of the sun. We are going down the valley, going down the valley, going down the valley one by one. Let's look at our next guy here. There's another group that was very influential. Some of these guys were rediscovered. Either their recordings were, or some of them were actually physically still around in the 1960s when the folk music revival happened. And some of their recordings became very influential. Actually, Loudon Wainwright III, if anybody knows who he is, famous songwriter, did a whole treatment on Charlie Poole. And this guy was, he was the banjo player, and now the fiddler was Posey Rohr, and the guitar player. Yes, well, anyhow, the three of them together had a sound that was very precise, and Charlie Poole actually played an early three-finger style of banjo. and it was very precise and just the sound that they created and the tunes were very influential. And so he was another big name. I believe he recorded for Columbia Records also. And so that's going to take us up to the next fellow, which is one of my favorites, Uncle Dave Macon, the Dixie Dewdrop. This guy was from Middle Tennessee, and he's actually still a beloved figure in Middle Tennessee to this day. He was very similar to Fiddle and John Carson as far as they were roughly the same age. They were probably in their early 50s when this technology stuff started happening, and about 100 years ago when they started making these recordings. They both had huge repertoires of old songs that they had brought out of the 19th century. Uncle Dave became a little bit better known. He's another one that's in the Country Music Hall of Fame because he became involved with the Grand Ole Opry radio program, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit here. So he became associated with that, and his career, was boosted with that. And he made it onto the Harry Smith folk anthology, and Fiddle and John didn't. So, like I said, the Georgia guys down there, they just kind of faded away. But Uncle Dave was, he was a very powerful entertainer, very exuberant. I've always said that, you can't be sad listening to Uncle Dave's recordings. He just exuded positivity and happiness, and he was a very powerful entertainer, and he recorded a lot of, I forget exactly the amount, but a lot, just like Fiddle and John. It was several hundred recordings that he made before it started with the Vocalion Company. And so I'm going to try to do you a couple of Uncle Dave tunes here. And this is an old minstrel tune. Goes like this. Thank you. About 3 or 4 Uncle Dave tunes and you're ready for a shot of oxygen or something, Well, here's a little bit easier one that he did. Another old minstrel tune. And it's called I'm a-Gwine Back to Dixie. fun one. This is a little something Uncle Dave used to do, and the story was, well, kind of a recording story. For one, Uncle Dave, he liked to rock around and stomp his feet, and the recording engineer come in and said, Uncle Dave, you can't do that. It's upsetting the recording, and you're ruining the wax. You've got to stop that. And he said, well, I can't play if I can't stop my foot. So they went and found a furniture store and bought a pillow to put on the floor so he could stomp on that. They used to get up and dance around and frolic around the stage, and he'd forget he was on the radio, and old Judge Hay that ran the Grand Ole Opry, he'd have to pick a big old heavy microphone up and try to follow him around and so forth. But anyhow, here's a little tune, the little way Uncle Dave used to do it. It goes like this. I'm running downtown, going around your sack of flour, buying a cookie every hour, eat my skillet good and greasy all the time. Eat my skillet good and greasy all the time. Got chickens in my sack, bloodhounds on my track. I'm pulling for you, shanty ho, ho, ho. I'm pulling for you, shanty ho. Got chickens in my sack, bloodhounds on my track. I'm pulling for you, shanty ho, ho, ho. I'm pulling for your little shanty ho. I'm going downtown, wanna stop me big hand, keep my skillet good and greasy all the time. Keep my skillet good and greasy all the time. There's a man on the log, finger and trigger now, aha. Well, the gun head went blip, and the bullet head whipped zip. Got the hog with all his grip, skillet good and greasy all the time. Keep my skillet good and greasy all the time. All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Well, let's see where we're at here. I think we're ready to go to Bristol. Now, that's a photograph I took a couple years ago on State Street in Bristol, Tennessee, and Bristol, Virginia. Well, why don't you make up your mind, you say? Well, it's hard to do because the state line runs right down the middle between them yellow lines right there. One side's Tennessee and the other side's Virginia. And there's the old Paramount Theater. That big sign up there at the end of the street says Bristol. I think it says a fine place to live, something like that. It says Virginia, Tennessee. That sign was put up in 1910, so that's been there a long time. And it was there when the Bristol recording sessions happened. And so this was a big deal in the scope of this whole story. The Ralph Peer had switched from the OK Company over to Victor. He went over to the big guns, and he made kind of an arrangement. He started to discover that the whole idea of this music business was going to be repeat business. So he came up with the idea of paying the performers royalties when they would bring him a song and he'd record them. He had a contract where they would receive royalty payments off of the record sales. So then they would bring him more songs. So that's kind of, it was out of his mindset that the whole record business as we kind of knew it for the past century kind of developed. So he went to Victor essentially for no salary, with the understanding that he could keep the rights to all the ownership of the copyrights for the songs. And in doing so, he built a huge catalog of music and became very wealthy doing so. He was also involved with some of the popular music of the day, like Hoagie Carmichael and Fats Waller and people like that. Louis Armstrong, too. He was kind of credited with discovering him. So he did a lot outside of the hillbilly music. But anyhow, Pop Stoneman helped arrange the idea of going to Bristol. This was a railroad terminal town, fairly bustling little town for that day and age in the South. So in the summer of 1927, they set up shop. By this time, Victor had their remote equipment as well. And they started putting ads in the papers and so forth, advertising for people to come and record. And so there was several people that recorded there over a 2-week period. But the two that really made a big splash was, one of them was a fellow from way down in Mississippi. And he was actually living in the Asheville, North Carolina area, trying to make a living playing music, and he came up to Bristol. His name was Jimmy Rodgers. He became known as the father of country music. And the other one was the Carter family, and they were actually somewhat local. They lived just up into Virginia, in southwestern Virginia, up in the mountains. There was A.P. Carter and his wife Sarah and their sister-in-law Maybelle. And they had a long association with country music because one of Maybelle's daughters, June Cash, or Carter, eventually married Johnny Cash and became June Carter Cash. And so they had a long association. But anyhow, these guys, when their records hit, it really changed the whole dynamic of it because it became a big deal. And just, sales and stuff like that they never dreamed of before. So it was kind of like the beginning of, the modern era. It was the end of the pioneer era, or the ending of it, and the beginning of what was to come. So I'm going to try to do you a couple songs from these people. Jimmy Rodgers, Elvis gets a lot of credit kind of for doing, like stuff that came from the black community, like rhythm and blues type of thing, and kind of presented it to a broader audience. And Jimmy Rodgers actually was the first one that did that, 25 years or so earlier, because he was basically doing, he would take 12-bar blues and put his own twist to it. And for whatever reason, he developed this yodel thing that he did, and he was a former railroader, so he was known as the singing brakeman, but then he also later became known as the blue yodeler. So I'm going to do you his first big hit song, which I very rarely ever do this for whatever reason, but he recorded a couple songs at Bristol that sold modestly, just enough that they had him come back and do a second recording. And then this T for Texas thing, it was called Blue Yodel #1. There eventually became 13 of them in a series. But it was called Blue Yodel, and it became a fad. It just hit like crazy. By the mid-1930s, every aspiring country singer was trying to yodel like Jimmy Rodgers, and most of them not doing too well at it. But anyhow, this was T for Texas. T for Texas, T for Tennessee. T for Texas, T for Tennessee. T for Thelma, that gal made a wreck out of me. Well, if you don't want me, mama, you sure don't have to stall. If you don't want me, mama, you sure don't have to stall. 'Cause I can get more women than a passenger train can haul. I'd rather drink muddy water and sleep in a hollow log. I'd rather drink muddy water and sleep in a hollow log than to stay in Atlanta treated like a dirty dog. 'cause the Georgia water, Lord, tastes like turpentine. Yodel-day, yodel-day, yodel-dee-dee. T for Texas, T for Tennessee. Sing 'em, boy. T for Texas, T for Tennessee. T for Selma, that gal that made a wreck out of me. Thank you. Jimmy, he sang a lot of different types of songs and ballads and so forth, and a lot of railroad songs, bums, hobo type of songs, and love ballads. He did well solo with him as his unique guitar style, but they did put a lot of different backup bands with him. Some of them was almost border on like jazz type of accompaniments, you know, clarinets and things of that nature, slide guitars. Anyhow, I'll do you another one here that was probably one of his more popular songs and that he's remembered by. There's 3 or 4 tunes that he was probably remembered by. But this one was a railroad song, and it's called Waiting for a Train. All around the water tank, waiting for a train, 1,000 miles away from home, sleeping in the rain. I walked up to the brakeman to give him a line of talk. He said, if you got money, I'll see that you don't walk. Well, I haven't got a nickel, not a penny can I show. Get off, you railroad bum. And he slammed the boxcar door. Yodel-day, yodel-day, yodel-day. Well, he put me off in Texas, the state I dearly love. The wide open spaces all around me, and the moon and stars up above. Well, nobody seems to want me or lend me a helping hand. I'm on my way from Frisco, I'm going back to old Dixieland. Now my pocketbook is empty and my heart is filled with pain. I'm 1,000 miles away from home, waiting for a train. Yodel-day, yodel-day, yodel-day. Thank you. I'll give you one more of Jimmy's tunes here. This one was one he did a little bit later in his career, and they were trying to get a kind of a pop orchestra behind him. There was plans of doing maybe a nationally broadcast radio program out of New York City, and they probably had a lot of big plans, but Jimmy had tuberculosis, which back in those days was not curable. It was just kind of a ticking time bomb. Sometimes it would kind of back off a bit and then it would rear up again, and he kind of battled it the whole time, you know, that he was famous, and eventually passed away in 1933 at the age of 35. So he was made a big impression while he was here, to the point where he became like really the first country music superstar. He was a folk hero in his day, and people even in the other thing that kind of knocked everything for a loop was the Depression that started in the 1930s and the deepening economic woes of the country, and people even with very little money would still strive to try to buy the latest Jimmy Rodgers record because he just meant a lot to them. And so he was, I even remember myself, you know, when I was younger and I first started singing these songs, there was old people that remembered listening to him, you know, on the old Victrola back in the day, and And you could tell that he was a very, meant a lot to the people, So, but anyhow, this is a little more of the kind of a pop type of thing that he tried to do, but I get a lot of requests from the people who like this. It's called Miss the Mississippi and You. I'm growing tired of these big city lights, tired of the glamour and tired of the sights. In all my dreams I am roaming once more, back to my home on the old river shore. I'm sad and weary, far away from home, miss the Mississippi and you. Days are dark and dreary everywhere I roam, miss the Mississippi and you. I'm rolling the wide world over, always alone and blue. Nothing here to cheer me under heaven's dome, miss the Mississippi and you. Mockingbirds are singing around my cabin door, miss the Mississippi and you. Memories are bringing happy days of yore, miss the Mississippi and you. I'm rolling the wide world over, always alone and blue, so blue, longing for my homeland, a muddy water shore, miss the Mississippi and you. The Odaleko, Odaleko, Mississippi and you. Thank you, appreciate it. Well, I'm going to do you a couple Carter family tunes here now, and they were kind of the flip side. Jimmy, he did some songs that were a little bit rowdy. He kind of had that rowdy, matter of fact, one of his songs was called My Rough and Rowdy Ways. The Carter family, on the other hand, was they always on their advertisements, it said this program is morally good. And but AP would go out and find these songs, travel through the mountains, and actually had a black fellow that traveled with him by the name of Leslie Riddle. And AP would remember the lyrics, and Mr. Riddle would remember the tune. And between the two of them, they captured a lot of really good old tunes and brought them home to Victor. And so one of their more popular ones, I guess, was I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes. I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes while sailing far over the sea. I'm thinking tonight of her only, and I wonder if she ever thinks of me. 'Twould have been better if my love had been never in this wild And I wonder if she ever thinks of me. You told me that you'd always love me and swore we were never to part. But a link in the chain has been broken, and I'm left with a sad aching heart. Oh, I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes while sailing far over the sea. I am thinking tonight of her only, and I wonder if she ever thinks of me. When the cold, cold grave shall enclose me, will you come there and shed just one tear, and tell all those strangers around you a poor heart that you broken lies here? Oh, I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes while sailing far over the sea. I'm thinking tonight of her only, and I wonder if she ever thinks of me. Thank you, thank you. Well, I'll give you another Carter family tune here. This is probably one that's, they have a lot of well-known tunes. There's a lot of, if you go to bluegrass festivals nowadays, you'll hear a huge amount of Carter family tunes that got absorbed into the bluegrass music catalog. Gold Watch and Chain, Weeping Willow, there's several. But this is one that's probably got a lot of notoriety back in when the Old Brother movie soundtrack came out, and they used old-time music and bluegrass music and so forth. So, good message in this. That's one thing I liked about Carter family tunes. It was usually had a good message to them. And this is called Keep on the Sunny Side of Life. There's a dark and a troubled side of life. There's a bright and a sunny side too. Though we'll meet with the darkness and strife, sunny side we also may view. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It'll help us every day. It will brighten all the way. It will keep on the sunny side of life. Oh, the storm in its fury broke today, crushing hopes we had held so dear. But the storm will in time pass away, and the sun will shine again bright and clear. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It'll help us every day, it will brighten all the way, if we'll keep on the sunny side of life. Let us greet with a smile of joy each day, though the sky be cloudy or fair, and let us trust in the Savior always, who keeps us everyone in His care. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It'll help us every day, it will brighten all the way, if we'll keep on the sunny side of life. If we'll keep on the sunny side of life. Alrighty, thank you kindly. guess a couple of closing remarks to this whole episode here. First of all, there's going to be a lot of people probably saying, well, you left out this guy and this gal, and I apologize, but this is actually, there's a lot to this. There's a lot more than you think. You know, a lot of stuff happened there in that pioneer era, and it was very interesting, and it was very good, because it was just really pure stuff. Being ahead of the industry, they didn't have the songwriter trying to write the next hit song. They were just capturing this really pure American folk music that was just in people's lives, and it was just beautiful stuff. This whole thing roughly lasted from 1923 to about 33, when the Depression really just shut things down. So things kind of came to a halt. The radio barn dance shows were becoming more and more popular. Radio was becoming the thing. It was actually starting to replace the phonograph to a point where people weren't buying as many records because they could just turn the radio on and listen to music for free. And so the WSM Grand Ole Opry, of course, still exists even to this day. And that started in 1925. And there were many others back in those days. The clear channel radio system with the 50,000 watt clear channel stations that would reach several states kind of enabled this. So you had WLS out of Chicago had the National Barn Dance, and WRVA Richmond, Virginia had the Old Dominion Barn Dance. So there was a lot of country music that was out there that kind of floated along through the 30s and into the 1940s. So after World War II, things started to return to normal. The Depression was over, the war was over, people could start to, live normal lives again. And by that time, the pioneer era was long gone. Everything had changed. The population demographics changed, taste in music, the electric instruments were coming in, the honky-tonk sound started to become the thing. So that kind of got, the talking pictures. You got your singing cowboys became famous. Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, that type of thing. One of the things that happened, I mentioned that a lot of these phonograph companies were from the north. And one of the things that made, so how did Music City, how did Nashville become known as Music City? Well, that was Roy Acuff, was one of the big singers on the Grand Ole Opry, and his writing partner, Fred Rose, kind of opened local offices and brought the record companies to Nashville. So they started centralizing the business there. And so it became, when at one time that was almost like the central location. If you were going to make it in country music, you had to go to Nashville, had to record there, had to be on the Grand Ole Opry there. So all of this other stuff just kind of faded away. And so it changed. It was a new era, which kind of brings us, I guess, probably to our last. Let's look at the Carter family. Yes, there's Jimmy. We didn't even look at Jimmy Rodgers. There's the singing brakeman in his railroad outfit. There's A.P. Carter, Sarah Carter, with her big old Gibson guitar, and A.P.'s wife, Sarah. So after World War II, into the 1950s, here's your new era. Hank Williams, one of the greatest hillbilly country music singers and songwriters ever. And so that's where we leave off. That's the history of the history. So a couple honorable mentions. There was Bradley Kincaid, Grayson and Witter, Burnett and Rutherford. There was a lot of music recorded back in those days. So I thank you for joining me, for listening to me. I appreciate you. If you're out there on the web somewhere listening to this, I hope you enjoyed it. It's going to be archived on my YouTube channel. You can also check redhowland.com. Well, folks, there it is. There's the Hillbilly Music History Workshop. Now, that's the standard version for the large majority of the population that doesn't really know anything of the events that unfolded a century ago in rural music. We have a more in-depth version that we can go into for certain festivals and
universities and colleges and so forth, where we get into more of an open-ended discussion and some tune workshops and so forth. But that's the broad brush of it right there. So I hope you enjoyed it. We thank you for tuning in. And for further information, this is all the contact information here. We have bretthowland.com. We have the YouTube channel at bretthowland1716. And of course, Facebook. So, couple of slight corrections there in the course of things. The guitar player, Charlie Poole's guitar player's name I was trying to remember was Roy Harvey. And although there were others that filled that particular spot from time to time as well. And I erroneously pointed out the person on the left in the Carter family photograph was Maybelle Carter. And I believe I said Sarah Carter. So there was Maybelle and AP and then Sarah. So, but that's it. Thanks to everybody involved. And again, we appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed it. So we'll hopefully see you down the road. Thank you.